Wolf Pack, what is going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here with another best ball draft. We're a little earlier than typical on Monday. We got a couple scheduling conflicts, and we are going to be diving into today, though, the quarterback position. If you haven't already, we've hit running backs, receivers, and tight ends. We saved quarterbacks for last because it's kind of the simplest, but there's also so many factors at play when it comes to quarterbacks, in particular stacking, the Konami code, so many different things to consider as you draft your quarterback position. So we are going to dive right on in. Of course, we'll fire up a draft right after. But let's, as we often do, Mo, with these position previews, we look at like what's different about the 2024 market. How have things changed? We saw a huge flip in the tight end market and what's going on there. And we're kind of seeing something similar here with the elite quarterbacks, at least. What's a trend that you've really noticed in these drafts so far?
Yeah, so last season, after the success of Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen in 2022, last season, 2023, there was just QBs smattered across the board in the first two rounds of drafts. Along with the tight ends, it's kind of in a similar spot. And both of them ended up failing in 2023. So both of them have reduced prices. So just taking a look back to last season, we had at some point during the offseason, so these Underdog ADPs that I'm referencing are from August of last year. So about the final ADP. But Jalen Hurts was a round one pick. His ADP was sitting right at 12. We had Mahomes and Allen both there in the second round. Lamar and Fields in the third round, and then Burrow and Herbert were staples of the fourth round throughout the entire offseason. So there was a good chunk of the QB1s being drafted in the first four rounds last year, and that's just simply not the case. We have only three quarterbacks going in the first four rounds this year, and none of them are going in rounds 1 through 3. Allen, Hurts, and Lamar Jackson are all going in round 4 this year, and sometimes you'll see Hurts or Allen make their way up into the third round. But for the most part, you don't really see a quarterback go off the board until the fourth round this season, which is completely different from last year. The failure of elite quarterback, especially with Mahomes and the Chiefs offense not exactly working out, it's just completely depressed the prices. And that also has a little bit to do with the wide receiver thirst that we see in these drafts and people just needing to get their wide receivers, especially in these underdog drafts. But it's a significantly depressed market in 2024. And I feel like that's something we can take advantage of. I've grabbed an elite QB in about 40% of my drafts. I was looking at my exposures, and it's pretty easy when you can grab one of these guys. I mentioned Allen, Hurts, Lamar going in round 4, but we've got Mahomes and Richardson going in round 5, and some other quality options going even later than that, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But you can grab a high quality guy without spending a top draft pick like you did last year. So it's really interesting, and I'm looking to attack drafts from that perspective in terms of just frequently grabbing an elite quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. You get these guys, especially on Underdog, where it's half PPR settings too. We saw how crucial Hurts was just 2 years ago. Allen has regularly been one of the highest advanced players as an early quarterback. And yes, it quote unquote failed last year. Those guys still were really solid. And now that you're getting them in that round 4 price, kind of back to that wide receiver avalanche and who do you grab? What do you take for a detour? I do think one of the winning strategies this year really could boil down to that round 4 elite QB. I am definitely in the same boat. Allen is my second highest exposed QB right now. I have a good amount of Hurts, but it does typically come down to, did I take Devonta Smith or A.J. Brown? Of course, with the stacking piece, and we're going to talk about why that's so crucial in just a second. I have a good amount of Lamar lately, too, because I have seen that strategy. I've sent you a couple screenshots. We talked about it, where if you snag Mark Andrews in round 4, let's say you sometimes see Lamar go at the top of round 4 to pair with Zay Jones. Makes total sense. I get it. But if the Zay Jones drafter, not Zay Jones, Zay Flowers, of course. Yeah, Zay Jones in round 4 would be criminal. Zay Flowers, of course. But if you see that happen, and then Mark Andrews, you take him in round 4, I've seen very often now, especially in a sharp draft room, where Mark Andrews will fall to round 5 because people know. And that's one of the quick tips, too. We'll cover a bunch of them. But you want to recognize, are these smart drafters here? On Underdog, it is typically the case. You can't say the same for DraftKings drafts. Even as many values as you might find on DraftKings, you can't always rely on them to make the quote-unquote right choice and get the right stacking partners. You might get sniped with a Brock Purdy going to a naked team that has no 49ers, and you're building out a great stack. So you do want to read the room, get a sense of, can I rely on these people? Because that is going to change how and when you want to stack for sure. But I'm with you. I think the elite QBs, if there's any takeaway of this market, if I'm trying to find and inefficiency here. I do think it's the elite QBs this year. We will see. I do like a lot of the guys you can kind of quote unquote push that end up falling to round 9 and sometimes even 10 based on your stacking partners. We're going to cover those guys in a sec too. But I agree. I've noticed how much further. It's so crazy to think round 1 quarterbacks last year, multiple round 2, Fields going in round 3. Like what a world. It's good to see people are kind of waking up and not going that direction this year, but it's definitely creating some good investment opportunities. And one thing we'll always preach, if it's a quarterback show, folks, and while you're out there too, we got about 100 of you almost already. That thumbs up button will help get more people in here, help us get discovered. So thank you again. I know it was a time shift, but great to see a good amount. Bulldog, good morning to you, of our guys coming on in and rolling with us even at the time change. So thank you so much. And if you enjoy what you're hearing, please consider a like, a thumbs up, a retweet, any of that good stuff. But now moving on to the Konami code upside. You cannot have a quarterback show without just mentioning what a cheat code it is when you find a QB that can rack up points on the ground. And we, of course, know that's Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Right now, even Anthony Richardson going in that round 5 to 6 range, probably one I don't love, and we'll talk about our favorite targets soon. In the mid rounds, Kyler, Jaden Daniels, another one of them. But it is so impactful. This is a stat you pulled out last year. We were talking about rushing QBs that I absolutely love, and then to go even further on it. So 700 rushing yards. Every quarterback that's done that in the last 6 years has finished as the QB 10 or better. And going even further, across the last 10 years, 15 of 16 to hit 700 rush yards or 100-plus rush attempts has finished top 12. The only exception was Cam Newton on that abysmal Patriots team. I had to sludge through that as a Patriots fan that year. It was miserable, and he still was like the QB 16, 17. It wasn't even – you would never think he finished that high because it was one of the worst offenses I've ever had to put my eyes upon, and yet he still was actually fantasy viable many weeks because of that rushing floor. It is almost impossible to fail as a quarterback with rushing upside. And then if you stack on, like we've seen with Allen and Hurts, if you can sling the rock quite a bit too, then you just become, you need 3,000 or so passing yards, 25 or so passing touchdowns, and we're off to the races. You are just a monster in fantasy. So we definitely do love targeting those Konami QBs. There is changes the stacking philosophy a bit, and we're going to dive into stacks in just a second. But Mo, is there anything to add in terms of the Konami edge, or should we just move into what we do when we stack?
Yeah, let's just move on to stacking. Stacking, if you're consuming this best ball content on July 1st, you're probably familiar with the concept of stacking and how it's advantageous in best ball drafts and just in formulating your rosters and building out these teams. But it's just it's both statistically and like with historical data, it's been proven to be successful, both in terms of advancing your teams into the playoffs and then finding teams and getting them into further into the playoff rounds. But it's helpful to think about this as like an 18-leg parlay. You've got 18 players on your roster, and in order to succeed in these best ball tournaments, we need to hit every leg of that parlay. We need to have everything be right in terms of picking the right guys and finding the most successful players. And if you're taking a team stack, it would be probably helpful to define what a stack is for the people who may not know. It's when you draft a quarterback and then pair him with a couple of his pass catchers, whether it be one, that's called like a skinny stack, 2 or 3 pass catchers. If you get much past 3, people like to call it like a giga stack, whatever you want to call it. But
onslaught DFS, people refer that as, I'm going all in on this offense to go bananas.
Yeah. So when you make a stack, you're basically you're not betting on a bunch of individual players. You're betting on an offense to succeed. And that's a lot easier of a thing to get right. Just saying like, I want to have a bunch of Dallas Cowboys, and I'm going to say that the Dallas Cowboys offense is going to be one of the better offenses in the NFL. I'm going to draft Mahomes, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, and bet on the Chiefs offense. And you can do this for any team, but betting on an individual offense is a lot easier than betting on a bunch of individual players. And looking back to like the parlay analogy, if you have an 18-leg parlay and you have correlated bets, like let's say you bet on Dak Prescott's over in passing yards and CeeDee Lamb's over in receiving yards, like those are correlated bets. And if you do that on a sports bet, the book is often going to reduce your odds in terms of your total payout. But if you do that in best ball, we don't see that reduction of odds. And making a team stack is exactly what a correlated bet is. You're making bets on an individual offense to succeed. So just like through that analogy, you can kind of see why it makes sense. It just limits the number of bets we have to get right. Instead of getting 18 different players saying they're going to be successful, you stack your roster through 2 or 3 different quarterbacks, and you just say, I'm going basically not all in necessarily, but I'm making big bets on these offenses to succeed in 2024. And by doing that, you only have to have a couple of offenses that succeed instead of a couple of different instead of 18 different players. And looking to the data that kind of backs this up, not only are teams advancing or doing what better in the playoffs, but they're also advancing at higher rates. So this is from Mike Leone's over at ETR, his best ball manifesto piece that he did last year, just a little over a year ago from now. He looked back at the BBM3 data that showed not only are people who are stacking one quarterback, people who are stacking multiple quarterbacks on their rosters have a higher advance rate than neutral. So a neutral advance rate would be advancing 2 out of every 12 teams, because that's how many teams advance out of each pod. But if you stack multiple QBs, he found in BBM3 that 30% of teams that stacked multiple QBs ultimately advanced into the playoffs. So you're able to get more teams into the playoffs with stacked quarterbacks. And then looking into the playoffs itself, you're able to find more success with quarterback stacks in the actual playoffs, because you're once again, I mean, it's just you're making bets on individual offenses to succeed. You don't need as much to go right in your way to succeed. So this is kind of just showing your expected win rate in the playoffs and in each stage of the playoffs, given that you've game stacked and team stacked your quarterbacks. So this is can kind of be a little bit a lot to look at, but if you kind of break it down and read through it, you can see that when teams have 2 stacked quarterbacks and both of them feature game stacks, that you have a much higher win rate, 17% bump across the board in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs with 2 game stacked QBs. And then even with 3 stacked QBs, you can improve your win rate in the playoff rounds, given the fact that you've made these bets on these offenses. Is there anything else you want to add?
Pause you real quick, Mo, just to make sure everyone knows out there, you probably do again if you're watching best ball content in July 1st. But game stack, when we're referring to that, we have a whole episode too on week 17 game stacking. Essentially what that means is bringing back, you look at the schedule, you see who they might be facing in that crucial championship week, and you bring back pieces. So that way you're betting on not just this team to go off, but the game environment to also go off, which would, of course, encourage that team and the opponent to go off as well. So I might stack a common example is Tua, Tyreek. Maybe I sneak in Devon Achane, and then I also mix in some Browns, their week 17 opponents, so Cooper in round 4, Njoku in round 9. And now I'm betting on that game stack. So I have my quarterback stacked. Of course, that's the most important because that goes through the entire season. But then some of these data points are referring to those game stacks, which also are really important. We're not going to dive into too much of that because we have a whole episode on that. Go back and check it out. We talked about our favorite week 17 game stacks over in the Roto Street Journal YouTube channel. But continue forward, Mo. I just didn't want to make sure that was clear to anybody that may have a question, which they probably don't. But
I didn't have a whole lot else to add. It's pretty clear. Like if you think about it through the analogy of putting together an 18-leg parlay for your team and having to have success, like just wanting to bet on an individual offense to succeed. And then the data backs that up. Every single team that has taken down the Best Ball Mania tournaments has utilized team stacking as well as game stacking to some degree. And once again, if you want to have a better in-depth look at that, go check out our previous episode. I also did a write-up on both these concepts over at rotostreetjournal.com if you want to consume that in written form. But it's just a pillar of success in best ball, and the data backs it up. The teams that have, like in practice, the teams that do well in these tournaments all utilize this strategy of stacking their quarterbacks. So it's clear that this is something that you absolutely have to do. It's something that's talked about in best ball pretty frequently is just table stakes. Like what do you have to bring to your team to just simply be able to compete in these tournaments? And we've talked about wide receiver firepower being one of those things. And the other key pillar in terms of just developing a team that has any chance of competing is having your quarterback stacked. But is there anything else you want to add, or do you want to move on to some of these later stacks, these sleeper stacks?
Yeah, the only we'll definitely talk about our favorite stacks in just 1 second. The only thing I would add to is in that best ball manifesto, Mike Leone did his 2024 update. You can hear him on a bunch of pods talking about. You can find it at Establish the Run. Always encourage it. That is just, if you're playing best ball, you can't get a better sense of it. But what he found in last year's tournament was the idea that 3 quarterback stacking is really interesting for the playoffs. Now, 2 quarterbacks, as we were alluding to earlier, is the best in terms of regular season advance rate, getting your teams through, is having 2 quarterbacks with at least 1 to 2 pass catchers. That is really important. But if you actually stacked 3 quarterbacks, far less teams, under 5% of teams were doing that in the playoffs. And that ultimately led to that having a higher expected value for your teams, where 2 game stacked quarterbacks in the playoff expected values were worth 153. 3 game stacked quarterbacks were worth $164 in terms of your expected team value. And then those win rates took a significant spike up as well. Those are some great graphs and whatnot in that best ball manifesto. So mixing in, that's one of my things I've been trying to do more often, is not just having 2 stacked quarterback teams, but 3 stacked QBs as well. I think a lot of people will probably be adopting that strategy. So it might become a little less EV than what it was last year when it was more unique. But when Leone says a important strategy, a lot of people follow, myself included. The guy is a wizard with stacking the data and interpreting it. So I will definitely be doing that. And so tips to how to, 3 stacked QBs, that's now, we're talking about multiple roster spots dedicated to single teams. It's not easy to pull off. So we're going to talk about who are some of our favorites and some tips for how to do it. But one of my, just the easiest things you can do, especially if you're new to best ball, I've only recently discovered this for whatever reason, but let's say I draft Jamar Chase at 4. One of my favorite things to do is just search Bengals in the player column, and then I just star all my Bengals. Of course, you have to be careful about timing out and getting somebody above ADP. You can kind of reorganize your queue after you've queued the different teams. But I love just searching the team I've drafted, starring those players, and kind of setting up those targets. So I don't even have to really think in the back of my mind. They're already just sitting there looking at me. Another tip to do that too is, why not also search? So we're going with this Bengals example. I'll search for the Broncos, their week 17 opponent as well. We talked about importance of game stacking. So I'll just star all those Broncos going a little bit later. And then that it starts to bake in that little flexibility as well. Like, let's say I do miss out on Joe Burrow for whatever reason. I tried to get cute. I want him to push and slip, and somebody ends up sniping me. I can ultimately still stack up a week 17 game stack with Bo Nix later. Some of those later pass catchers, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin. So I do love making sure I star those guys. Allowing these QBs to slip, especially those pocket passer QBs, the Burrows, the Daks, the Cousins. If you have, let's say I start Drake London and Kyle Pitts, especially if I have Bijan somehow on that team as well. If your room knows anything, again, this is reading the room is important in these type of situations, but it's very, very unlikely that somebody's going to want a unstacked Kirk Cousins, knowing how important this is to value is stacking wise. No one's going to go for the statue quarterback if he is unstacked. And so you want to read the room, of course, but I've seen Kirk Cousins, I've seen Tua fall 25, 30 picks past ADP if a team started Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, for example. I've seen Tua go 160 before. It makes sense. Why would I want Tua with no weapons attached to him in these type of tournament situations? So don't be afraid. It's kind of almost become common to do CeeDee Lamb, and then now Dak is falling to you. For a long time, Dak was going in the 80s, but because people are just letting him slip, you can sometimes get sniped with Ferguson and then some backdoor Cowboy stacks. Burrow, though, originally was like a 70 ADP, and now people are waking up to the fact that you can let him kind of wrap around into those 90s. You do have to be aware of, you draft Jamar Chase, or where that T. Higgins drafter take him. Does he have a quarterback? How's that looking? But reading that room, seeing if these people are typically doing the right thing, you can ultimately get some real value by letting these quarterbacks slip. And the last tip I have is for backdoor stacks, and that's kind of a separate category. But is there anything in terms of just like tips, ways that you make sure you get your stacks, Mo, that we didn't cover there?
Yeah. So one thing that I would recommend doing, if you're not, if you don't have the week 17 matchups, like kind of committed to memory, and I personally like I only have I think like 13 of them. Like there's a couple of them that slip my mind here and there.
Oh,
Like
I've got them down pat. Come on, you got to have these by now.
the Carolina Tampa Bay one slips me every once in a while. But like I'll be building out my Tampa Bay. I'm like, who am I bring backs need to be? But that's beside the point. But if you don't have them all committed to memory, like just pulling up like plenty of people tweeted out there, myself included, just like the week 17 matchups, because there's not really like a one good place like on NFL.com or like ESPN like that you can quickly see all of them. So just kind of like bookmark a tweet or something. Like I said, you can go find it on my profile at Mo_FFB. You can go find it somewhere, just like a list of all the week 17 matchups that you can quickly reference, because game stacking, I think a lot of people kind of understand the edge in team stacking and just like pairing your quarterback with the pass catchers. But the graphs that we just showed that game stacking can provide a massive edge, especially in the playoffs. I mean, like that's really the only time it's going to provide an edge is in the playoffs. I mean, having stacks is proven to improve your advance rate in the regular season, but the only time it's going to actually provide an edge is in the playoffs. But week 17 game stacking is like it's not the final frontier, but now that like people are kind of starting to catch up to find out where to find edges in this game, game stacking is one that you can definitely take advantage of by just hammering away these game stacks and just I think Leone's takeaway was that for having 6 to 9 game stack players is what you really want to do. And that might sound crazy, like having so for example, like it's kind of hard with Dallas Eagles, but just for another example, like maybe Green Bay, Minnesota, like you want to have, that's like could be a very ripe game for scoring. It's going to be indoors at Minnesota. Like you want to have 6 to 9 players ideally, like if you can. And this data, it'll change year over year, but we generally think having in that range in terms of like looking back at the historical data. This is mostly stemming from the work done by Mike Leone over at ETR that we discussed, but having in the range of 6 to 9 players from a game has proven to be optimal in the finals for best ball. So if you can get like an Addison, a Jefferson, a Hawkinson, one of the running backs, one of the quarterbacks, and then a couple of those Green Bay receivers, that's a whole nother debate for a different day, picking and choosing which guys you like out of Green Bay. But just it might seem like overkill, but loading up on an individual game has proven to be successful.
Absolutely. And so, fully agree with all that. So again, the game stack element here, we do not want to forget at all. In terms of, again, we know how important trying to get at least 2 stacked QBs is, and how 3 quarterbacks has actually proven optimal in terms of last year. Again, it's so hard to do because you're committing almost a third of your lineup to just one game, and then maybe another third of your lineup to another game. But if it is optimal, we got to figure out ways to do it. And one way is backdoor stacking. And essentially what that means is if you've gone a couple rounds and you have your first stack set up, but you're looking a little ambiguous, you don't know where else to go with a stack, who could you just draft late? What quarterbacks are falling that also have weapons that go late that you can then create a 2, 3, 4 player stack, maybe even more? And I've got a few favorites. I'd love to hear yours. I know you wrote about this at rotostreetjournal.com. There's some great podcasts out there as well. The ETR one did a great backdoor stack episode. It's really important though to study these things, just because if you let's say I've gone Josh Allen, I don't really want to invest a ton more capital into the position, but I know that 2 stacks is at minimal a huge edge. So I want to try to find a later edge as well and get that other backdoor stack. So I've got 2 that I really, really like, and we're talking later backdoor stacks. There's actually a couple middle round. It's kind of a medium door stack. We'll talk about that. Probably are my favorite to really attack. But ultimately, in terms of real backdoor stacks, one, I love the Titans. I really have talked about loving a way you can find this value too. A general trend we've seen is what offenses are undervalued. Oftentimes it is a new play caller coming in and upping the pass rate, or new weapons come in and up the pass rate. We've got both of those things here for the Titans. I love Brian Callahan, top 7 pass rate in every season with Cincinnati. Even Jake Browning was throwing it at a top 7 clip when Joe Burrow went down. And how much was that? Is that Zach Taylor versus him? Well, we'll find out. But they've really, all the steam is in early OTAs and everything. They're just going to be throwing the rock. I think Will Levis can absolutely sling that thing. So given that, I've really been drafting. You guys know I love Calvin Ridley. A lot of smarter people than me think he's a terrible value. So you could debate that for another day. But whether you have DeAndre Hopkins early, I love then creating a backdoor stack with Levis. And even if you miss on those two big guys, you can still get Chig, Tyler Boyd. If you really want to go after the corpse of Treylon Burks at this point, maybe him. Tajay Spears, though, in those middle rounds as well. You can definitely, after pick 100, there are plenty of Titans available, even if you didn't get DeAndre Hopkins and Ridley. I do love stacking them with him, those guys, of course. But I have a big believer that the Titans passing game is going to take a huge step forward, even with plenty of interceptions that a lot of people have compared Will Levis to drunk Jameis Winston for the hero throw rate is top of the league. But then the interception rates at the, it's going to be a fun experience. So I want some Titans backdoor stacks. I definitely love getting Will Levis. He's actually my second highest drafted quarterback right now. The other one I find myself landing on, maybe it's my fandom, but a lot of smart people, Pat Kerrane, this is his favorite backdoor stack. And the guy won $1 million just a couple years ago. So he's someone to pay attention to. He loves the Patriots this year. Drake May goes in the last 2 rounds of draft, shoots number 1 weapon potentially. And Jalen Polk goes 140s, 150s. He's starting to creep up a little bit, but he's the first pass catcher that comes off the board for the Pats. So whether you go with Polk and then you get Javon Baker later, Kendrick Bourne goes undrafted in a lot of these things. A lot of reports that I was reading this weekend, it was kind of a shock reading the Boston Globe. They're saying KJ Osborne is the first man out right now in drafts. So potentially KJ Osborne, he's going undrafted right now. I don't want to believe he's the number 1 for the Patriots. That would be a pretty horrible future for us. But hey, he's available for free right now as well. I love Hunter Henry. He's my second highest exposed tight end. You can get Antonio Gibson as a correlated pass catcher. So I love going Pats and Titans. If I haven't gotten a clear second stack, ideally that's my second stack. If that's your first stack, you're probably in a little trouble there. But as a backdoor stack, those are 2 teams I've been going after a ton. Is there anybody else, Mo, in terms of like backdooring that you really like?
Well, I am getting a lot of the Patriots as well. I just wanted to highlight one thing that you didn't mention. The rushing upside of the rushing floor rather, Drake May is kind of not discussed enough. I think he in his last 2 seasons of college, it was 1,200 rushing yards, and I believe it was 16 rushing touchdowns. The touchdown number, don't quote me on. I'm pretty sure that was it was in the teens. And then it was 1,200 rushing yards in his final 2 seasons. But just in his overall scramble rate in college, his scramble rate was 11.1%. And just to compare that to some other guys who are in the league now that are like kind of considered to be rushing quarterbacks, including Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was a 14.1% rushing rate. And then just looking at some other guys that are established in the league as rushers, their college rushing rate, Jalen Hurts, 13.9%. Justin Fields, 11.4%. Lamar Jackson, 9.9%. Kyler Murray, 9.4%. Richardson, 8.9%. Allen, 7.0%. And Drake May is all the way up there at 11.1%. So he's pretty comparable with Justin Fields in terms of his scramble rate in college. And not only was he scrambling a lot, he was productive, 1,200 rushing yards in his final 2 collegiate seasons. So it's just another reason to get on board with, and especially considering the price, it's just another great reason to get on board with the backdoor Patriot stack. But some other teams that I have been getting to a lot, and some of these kind of like push the boundary for like what can be considered a backdoor stack. But I've been getting a lot of the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels is my second highest owned quarterback in these best ball drafts. I think I've got about 15% Jaden Daniels. And you can just get to a lot of his weapons pretty easily. Like Terry McLaurin's available in the middle rounds. His price has come up a little bit. He's now at the end of round 4. You used to be able to get him in like the middle to late part of round 5, but it's still fine. I mean, but even if you don't want Terry McLaurin, there's just so many options available later in drafts. Brian Robinson available right around pick 100, Austin Eckler in the 120s, Jahan Dotson in the late 130s, Sinna in the 170s, McCaffrey in the 180s, and then you can like I know we've discussed it a little bit on the show. You can take a late final round stab on Zach Ertz if you really want to, but you can pair him up with just about anyone that you need. Like if you take Daniels, you can pair him up so easily just because there's guys like splattered across the final 7 rounds of these drafts that you can just kind of pick and choose who you want. And with Daniels, I think we've kind of talked about it in reference with some of these other rushing quarterbacks. You don't need to hammer the stacks like for Daniels to like pay off on your roster. Like stacking is helpful and you should stack them to a degree if you can. But like given the like Daniel's fantasy value funnels through his ability to run the ball. So it's not necessarily through his passing ability. So you don't need to like freak out if you don't like stack him heavily. But I just love grabbing Daniels. I think he's one of the final quarterbacks that has high-end rushing upside. And I know I kind of just referenced Drake May, but it's just, yeah, you can grab him right around pick 100. It's really easy. And then the second one that I kind of wanted to point out is the New Orleans Saints. An offense that no one really seems to like this, like legitimately like everyone I see talk about the Saints talks about how much they hate the Saints, but I don't know. They still finished 9th in scoring.
I was just going to ask if you knew where they finished in scoring, because I bet we quizzed the audience. They'd probably say 25th. I was shocked to see them at 9th myself.
9th in scoring.
I'm glad you know that one off the top of the head.
Yeah, 9th in scoring last season with Carmichael as their offensive coordinator, someone that no one really seems to like. Kind of bland and not like a super dynamic offense, but still led them to 9th in scoring. And now they've got a guy in Clint Kubiak who people think can deliver a pretty interesting rushing attack and just all around offense to hopefully breathe some life into this Saints team that has not been super exciting. But kind of looking at these stacking options, you can get Olave in the middle round or in the middle of round 2. Alvin Kamara is regularly available in round 7. Rashid Shaheed's kind of coming up, but he's available right around pick 100 these days. When I wrote the article on Roto Street Journal, he was right around 114. He's come up almost a full round, but still interesting given that spike week potential and his likely full-blown like full-time route participation this season without Michael Thomas there. Then Kendre Miller, someone that people like to take swings on in the 140s. And then Derek Carr is the quarterback, and you can get him dead last out of this group. He goes in the 180s. Like I've seen him fall all the way to like round 17, 18 in drafts just because no one really wants him. But here's another one about this offense. Do you know where Derek Carr ranked in terms of 300-yard passing games last season?
I know this one only because of DraftKings. Like you get the bonus on that. Yeah. I believe he was second, right? Wasn't he like number 2 in 300 yards?
Tied for first.
Oh my God, he's actually first. That's nuts.
Yeah. So like it matters on DraftKings because you get the bonus there. But I mean, like just like in terms of what he can produce in terms of an overall output, like Derek Carr, like everyone, like once again, everyone hates Derek Carr, but for fantasy, like you can get him in the 180s, like 190s, like why not? Like he's gonna have big passing days and it's easy to stack, especially if you grab Olave there in middle round 2. So I don't mind grabbing the Saints. It's like you can make the argument pretty easily just kind of looking at what they did last year. We think the play caller is going to be better. The Kendre Miller, you can go back and forth on Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller. I love Alvin Kamara in full PPR leagues because I just don't see him having anyone challenging him for that passing work. So, but on a half PPR site like Underdog, you can make the argument for Kendre Miller just because like Alvin Kamara not so good as a rusher. Maybe Kendre Miller gets more work. He wasn't healthy in his rookie season. So there's just a lot of things you can do with this offense. And it was fine last year. No matter what the preconceived notions of everyone else were, they scored a bunch of points. And what is the easiest way to predict what teams are going to have good fantasy producers? It's the teams that score points. So real football points in the NFL. So it's pretty easy for me, especially if I'm kind of scrambling. I can find a lot of these pieces late in drafts, and especially with the price of the quarterback being so late, it's not too hard to convince myself.
Yeah, I have a bunch to say about all the things you just talked about. I'm sure it might make sense to hit that join a draft here, but to react to just in the order of some of those topics you covered. One, I love the Saints too. Kubiak, a huge reason. Part of that, there's a great podcast by the Underdog crew, Hayden Winks and Josh Norris, and they talked about why Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed are some of their favorite targets right now, the guys they cannot stop drafting. I believe that was the one with John Daigle. And a big part of that was they had some of the hardest designed looks in the NFL. They were covering, they were sending these guys on the most inopportune routes. And the Kubiak key comes over from that 49ers style scheme where it's all about ball in space, getting you those layup type targets, letting you do your thing. A guy like Rashid Shaheed, like in a Debo role, could be nuts. Chris Olave, well, again, it was such an inopportune scheming last year. In a better setup, I could totally see all the preseason buzz right now, too, is how good of this offense has been for an accurate passer like Derek Carr, who can hit you in stride, let you do your things. It's going to be much more like a Dolphins, 49ers style scheme. So I could see a very heavy focus on just 2 to 3 guys, a condensed offense that is getting a ton of passing yards a game that already was successful last year, like you pointed out. I'm a huge fan of that. So I think the Saints are a great one to target, especially if you start Chris Olave. Jane Daniels is my actual third highest drafted quarterback. I'm trying to get that maybe to number 1. I know it's a little cheating calling it backdoor, but I am in love with him. If I miss out on elite QB, it looks like we are off and running. Which pick do we have here, Mo?
We're from the 7 pick. So
I get 7, 6, like 10, all of them. So we have a little time here. But if I've missed on the elite quarterbacks and I don't even have a stack, like I'm not going to require myself to have Terry McLaurin to get Jaden Daniels because of that Konami upside and all those stacking options. I am obsessed with taking Jaden Daniels in round 10, whether I already have a quarterback or especially if I don't have one, because I think he has the clearest top 5 ceiling of anyone going after those first 12 quarterbacks are off the board because of the rushing upside. I am a huge fan of Daniels, even again, if I don't have Terry McLaurin, because you can stack him late, that's the guy I go after more than anything. The only other guy in that range, I sometimes see Jordan Love fall. And if I have no Packers yet, well, it's probably a likelihood because the only Packers going before Jordan Love are Josh Jacobs in like the 40s to 50s, and then Christian Watson. I can still take Jordan Love, and then oftentimes Romeo Doubs will fall to you. If you don't like Doubs, then you can always go Dontavian Wicks, one of my favorite targets this year. Marshawn Lloyd, I have a ton of ownership in, and I know we're about to pick in a second. You can get Luke Musgrave, though, so that's a sneaky. You can backdoor stack the Packers with a quarterback that's probably going to finish top 7 like he did last year. So I love that one as well. Are we looking at Bijan or
Brees?
I like Bijan more myself, but I know we've done him already. So if you'd rather go the other way, that's fine with me.
I went Bijan. I was looking at my exposure the other day. I have a lot of Bijan. So I'm probably gonna have to start flipping that around, grabbing Brees ahead of Bijan just to balance those out, because I don't want to be too heavily exposed to Bijan, like relative to Brees. Like obviously I want a bunch of Bijan, but I like you said, I'm drafting like a criminal amount from pick 7 through 11. I texted you this morning. I have 1 share of Jamar Chase because I've drafted from the 4 slot twice. Out of like 60 drafts, I've drafted from the 4 slot twice. So that's kind of like no one really cares about my personal profile, but it's interesting. But
Michael Dubner has a great tracker you can enter your drafts in, and it will tell you like what pick percentage you have. I think like 75% of my drafts have been 7 or later. I've had the number 1 pick 3 times, and one of them got canceled. And this is out of like 170 drafts, like something sick, like demented how many drafts I've already done. Not all best ball manias, of course, like $3 tournaments and whatnot. But yeah, I cannot get to the top of the draft board. It's nuts. So hopefully one of these days we'll be able to show you a draft from there. I know we're wrapping around here, but yeah, I think one thing we didn't actually talk about that you quickly hinted at too was the idea of you have a mobile quarterback. You don't need to force in these multiple stacking partners. You can do a quote unquote skinny stack. Just McLaurin and Daniels is perfectly okay. But when you have a Cousins, you have a Levis, these statue guys that you know you're going to be relying on, the passing yardage, it makes sense. You almost really want, like CJ Stroud, we talked about this with a viewer last week, you really want 2 minimum stacked with those guys because you're banking on 350-yard days to be the reason you got there, not that he ran for 100 and a touchdown and then had like 150 and a passing score on top of it. You really are banking on Kirk Cousins going 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, so you want multiple weapons there. So that's just one last stacking note. I know we're about up here, Mo.
Drake London just barely misses us. He goes at 17.
Yeah, that would have been nice to load up.
I don't mind going Nico or Devontae here.
I like both of them. I'd leave it up to you. I probably have more Devontae, so I'm fine going Nico to mix it up. Here. But I love them both.
Would have loved to see Drake London and Bijan on the same team there.
Yeah, a stacking episode nonetheless, too. Yeah. That would have been all about stacking up this cost. But on a stacking episode, that's kind of why I like going Nico here, because you take Adams and Right now we don't know if it's Minshew or O'Connell. I'm on record saying whoever wins this job, I wouldn't be shocked for the Raiders becomes like this year's Baker Mayfield. I'm intrigued by the weapons. Might be a little more run heavy than we expect. There's a lot of good stats circling around right now about how Luke Getsy, the new coordinator there, was Devontae Adams' passing game coordinator for his 2 craziest seasons where he just broke fantasy. But he also had Aaron Rodgers, so you can only go too deep into that as well. But Nico does set us up better for a potential difference-making stack, and the way Stroud's been falling lately, I like the shot at maybe going after that. So I'm a big fan there. Get another share.
So one kind of just changing course here. One team / stack that I would be remiss if I did not talk about. I'm sure you can guess who I'm going to bring up here. It is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have Christian Kirk is my highest owned wide receiver, and Trevor Lawrence is my highest owned quarterback, and they're both up there for like my highest owned players in general. I don't know, like I just won't give up on Christian Kirk. You look at his before he got hurt last season, you look at what he was on pace to do. It was like 1,300 yard season, and he didn't get a ton of usage in the red zone, but he's gonna be the target leader in this offense. I mean, he's gonna get those easy targets out of the slot too, like we've talked about, loving those layup targets. You get a super high catch rate and just in general production, and without the target hog, like not necessarily target hog, but he had a legitimate impact on the overall target share and the target pie that we often reference in Jacksonville. Calvin Ridley's not there, and you can say I like Brian Robinson, but he's not going to earn targets at the rate, especially as a rookie, that Calvin Ridley was last year. And he'll probably take advantage and have some big plays, because he will, like, Calvin Ridley leaves behind a lot of red zone targets, or end zone targets specifically. And that's what Brian Robinson does really well, is make those splash plays and score a bunch of touchdowns. But yeah. I just love getting to this offense. And here we are on the clock. We can go DJ Moore, or we can just continue building out this Houston stack with a Tank.
I like building out the Houston one myself. I'm not a diehard of DJ Moore, so the fact that we're already invested in the Texans, but I'm with you. I'm getting more Brian Thomas as we've been drafting. I'm a big fan of Christian Kirk. I haven't landed him a ton, just because his price keeps creeping up, but I'm not opposed to it at all. And I just love, I'm on record a few times saying I love that division in general. I know week 17, them versus the Titans, one of my favorite matchups, but I think that division is just going to be ripe with shootouts between the Titans, the Texans, the Jags, and the Colts. Just fast-paced offenses, mediocre at best defenses. I was just going to say Cooper Kupp. I didn't even see him there. That would have been a guy I would have considered too. Is his ADP below Tank Dell?
They're like they're almost in line.
Yeah, he's another one I've been trying to kind of hammer in round 3. I would have been intrigued to go with him. I do like the Tank Dell. He wouldn't have made it back to us type of situation. One thing I'd be intrigued to potentially do here, given this seems like a sharp room, there's a lot of the receiver avalanche. You can kind of see already happening. Maybe trying the Andrews, and then will Lamar fall to us in round 5? It's a little deep of a fall for round 5, though. And we are behind at receiver, given we started at Bijan. So it's not a must, but it's something we could consider. It would give us some week 17 correlation as well. And then we could see what happens if Lamar makes it to us. Or do you just want to kind of play this one through Stroud? Because that's the other thing, too. If we take Andrews and Lamar doesn't make it to us, we still can get Stroud, as long as the Stephon Diggs drafter doesn't take him right in front of our face in round 5, which who knows? But yeah, what are you intrigued to do here with this?
I would prefer try and run this through the Houston offense, because like you said, like that's setting us up to have 3 non-wide receiver picks through the first 5 rounds. So I'm not super into that. So we're here on the clock. Kelsey's still there. And then Higgins or Kirk, I'm not really interested in doing in committing to Stroud or committing to Lamar.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I don't hate Kelsey. I would have a hard time pulling the trigger on Andrews over Kelsey. I like the rebound there, but if you want to go with your boy Kirk and start setting that up too, that's totally fine.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
I don't mind adding on another Christian Kirk share. So then we can
Oh yeah, there goes Lamar Jackson. So that would never have had that dream of dreams. So he's probably trying to attack it through the Lamar and then Andrews falls, which very well could happen.
I mean, if you see a badge in the first 6 picks, like they're probably got that on the top of their mind. Like, if you see someone who seems like they know what they're doing in the first couple of picks in these drafts, like that's like one stack that everyone has on the top of their mind. So
yeah. What I love too now is the fact that he has Lamar, so he's created some Week 17 correlation for himself. Well done. I like that. But there's no reason for us to even consider going Stroud until round 6 now. It seems, again, who knows what happens? You never want to jinx it. But I can't imagine with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts already gone before us, would somebody really take an unstacked Stroud? There is even the I've seen him fall like to
in
round 7. If we want it, because we're setting up a Jags thing here too. We could even push him past round 6 and see if he makes his way back to us in round 7. I don't know if that's too crazy for you, especially as we have 2 guys on the team. But
I was gonna suggest it probably even if you didn't bring it up. Like,
yeah, okay, we could get a little risky here. I like it. We'll see what happens. But
I regularly
the only other guy stacked with him. So, like, is he really going to go Lamar and then Stroud in round 7? Probably not.
Yeah, especially with us already having Kirk on the team. Like, I'm fine having Lawrence be like the first QB of a build, and like if someone wants to take an unstacked Stroud, like I'm fine with it. Like, let them. Like, I don't like, you're basically, especially with the Diggs drafter already having Lamar on the team, like be my guest. Take an unstacked Stroud without any of these 3 receivers. Like, you're I don't want to say you're lighting your money on fire, but it's not a plus EV.
Yeah, I say we push it. I'm into that idea. So I do like that you queued up Mixon. I think we take him in round 6 potentially.
So I've got Pitts here.
No, don't make me do it. I like Hollywood, Ridley, Jaden Reed. I'd like to get another receiver here.
I don't have very much.
You're not into Hollywood at all, huh?
I don't have very much Jaden Reed. So
and you prefer him to Hollywood?
Huh?
You prefer him to Hollywood?
I don't have much of either.
I'm good with either of those guys.
We'll go Hollywood.
Yeah, I know some people. Karane's not a huge fan of him. Again, guys, I like to listen to, but it depends on how this Rashee Rice suspension plays out. If it's 7-8 games, and I like Rice too at his price. I've really warmed up to him. But I could see Hollywood really. He took less money to go with the Chiefs for a reason, so he could get a monster deal after killing it with Mahomes and all the reports in OTAs where they were just a lights out duo with Worthy on the sideline too. And I like Worthy too. But no, I like the idea of Mixon potentially this next round. Stroud at 7 if he falls back to us, which we're set up well.
Try and push it around.
Yeah, I think we try it out. Worst case, we now have a couple outs there. We won't get Mahomes with. I guess that's one of the reasons Reed would have been potentially if we're as a tiebreaker to set up a Jordan Love later. Should we fail on the Stroud fallback? But I do like Hollywood Brown, but that's actually why that one might have made even more sense.
Yeah, it is what it is, and I'm gonna force feed Kyle Pitts to you at 66 if he's there. By the way,
yeah, we do have Bijan, and so again, Kirk Cousins stack now.
Exactly.
I'd be open to it over Mixon, somebody I like but don't absolutely love. And
we'll see who's there.
Mixon made me think too. If anybody has questions, comments, I know we're a little early, so our guy Thaddeus and some of the regulars that join us for the stream are not here, but we would love to answer any questions you have. Keeper, Dynasty, anything that's on your mind at all. Best ball, of course, as we're drafting, we would be happy. There he goes. No Pitts for us.
Count your lucky stars.
Yeah, I'm okay with Pitts too. You've made plenty of compelling cases for him. I totally get the upside narrative. And with a Bijan team, it would have made sense. I just didn't want to pass up on Reed or Hollywood Brown to get it. And I saw a couple tight ends already ahead of us. All right. What do you think? Mixon or Kittle is falling as well?
We can try and push. We won't get Ingram, but I'm fine with going Mixon and then figuring something else out later at tight end.
I've seen Ingram go round 8. Yeah. I know you say we won't get him, but I've seen it happen, and that could be pretty nice. So,
yeah.
especially if the Kirk team passes him up in round 7.
We're the Kirk team.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So,
if we, I got you.
I think the Kirk drafter pass him up and then get him in round 8.
Okay, I see what you meant.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna play around with like how to push things. We'll see how it goes for us, but we're gonna push. Like, can we get Stroud in round 7? We're gonna push. Can we get Ingram in round 8? And then Trevor Lawrence from there would probably fall. This is gonna be a fun one to see how this one plays out. I'm very intrigued by this team.
And you see Thomas making his way to 79 every once in a while. Oh, I mean, we got to take Stroud there.
Oh yeah, no, we can't pass up on Stroud twice.
No,
because then we're in the risk of like ADP value so crazy that other people
will just take him no matter what.
I wonder what the latest is he's ever fallen.
Someone, I think, I don't know. I've seen stuff like that out there, like high. I think it's only for rankings, like on Fantasy Pros, like high versus low. I don't think you can ever I don't think you can find that data for drafts. But
that would be useful if somebody was able to pull that. I'm sure there's got to be someone out there that like has that. We could try to figure out, build it ourselves. But like, what is the latest he has ever fallen? We're building a team where that would probably be the case because again, Diggs is already has Lamar Jackson, and they might take him in round 8, but I don't know that we would. I mean, anybody else would. Maybe the team with Kyle Pitts would, with like 5 receivers, Pitts, they just go, for an elite onesie, because that you're in the range there where that's kind of where Stroud probably should go anyways. But if you wanted to push it, like we'd have to have a compelling case for why we're pushing it though. Like, is there anybody on the board that's worth pushing it for?
Probably not. And this guy's about to timeout and take Stroud probably. Oh, he takes JSN on the timeout. Oh. So we got to get through this guy, Mad Mac. He takes Ferguson, and these two guys both have quarterbacks. So I think we're going to be able to pull this off unless someone does something a little out of pocket.
The Diggs team could do it and just say this is good value.
It's doable, but and there we get it at 79.
I think we got to. As much as I kind of want to play the push game, we don't have a reason to. Like Rice is gone, right? At this point, he's long.
Right. Rice is gone. There was no one really there.
Nice, man. I love how that turned out.
I can't complain about that at all.
So we have 2 good running backs at this point. I would have liked Ferguson or Ingram to make it to us in round 8, but this is looking like a punt tight end team, similar to the last one I think we did. Or no, that was 2 weeks ago.
I've got Bowers queued up for our next pick. It'd be a couple slots ahead of ADP, but nothing egregious. And I like the case for Bowers to ascend into that elite tier is pretty clear. And I mean, especially with us being a little behind at tight end, I don't mind doing it here.
Now, the one question I have, so should he make it to us? You see how every team in front of us has a tight end right now. I don't know if that should change things. Why don't we pull up the queue though? Let's see if there's like anything compelling. And I like the Bowers case, so I would totally be fine with that pick.
So we're looking at mostly running backs, and then we've got that Cliff at wide receiver. I wouldn't mind JMO or probably Cortland Sutton, to be honest. At receiver would be fine with me.
I would see JMO as a potential option more than Sutton. Ramondre I like the Steelers backs, but we're good at running back kind of already.
I would go receiver, or I would go Bowers before any of these running backs.
Yeah, the one thing is just everybody having a tight end in front of us. Like, roll the dice and see how he plays out.
Push it around once again.
And we're at Nico, Tank, Kirk, and Hollywood at receiver, right?
I'm fine to go receiver and then play the game. Do you like Jameson?
I'm intrigued by JMO, and I don't have nearly enough as I'd like to. And we're getting some ADP value on him.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, and if Bowers goes, he goes. He might go to the Ferg team. He might go to the Ingram team. But I imagine at least Njoku would fall to us. I've seen him even going in round 10. So I know it's not really correlated with much that we've got, but I could see that for sure.
We could do something with it, definitely. It's not crazy. It wouldn't be crazy to see Bowers there at 103, especially with all these guys already having tight end, like you mentioned. So
Yeah, that's the one thing that caught my eye was I saw a lot of blue in front of us.
yeah.
So yeah, maybe not because he is so good that like it makes sense that there's no reason to not go him if you already have a tight end like, and he's your favorite player on the board. In worst case though, if he goes maybe one of these running backs that we like that right now would have been too early. I like getting a little JMO here just because yes, we have Nico and Tank, but any given week, if the Texans just like faltered out, we need a little bit of firepower behind them. Certainly, if that was during the playoffs, we'd be screwed anyways. But we built out a nice tight Texan stack. The one thing I don't love about the Texans is it is tricky for the Week 17 correlation if you don't get it real early. Like that's part of why I was thinking of Andrews. But Kelsey was on the board. If we're gonna go tight end, we're gonna go Kelsey, no doubt. Yeah, I saw that 100%. Team got Kelsey and Mahomes. Like Kelsey fell to the end of round 4, which is just
not something you see often.
What a value that guy got.
Big time.
Kelsey, Pat Mahomes. But and then Daniels goes
Saquon in early round 3 as well.
Yeah,
that is and there goes Bowers.
Damn,
it is nice. What it is. We can grab a Njoku here and be okay. Cortland Sutton is still on the board. We'll see.
Yeah, let's see what the Q has up for us. I know we haven't done a ton of like Week 17 correlating, so it might be time to start thinking of that.
I mean, we're not going to be able to get much of the Ravens at this point.
No,
like we'll be able to throw a dart at Walker later on, but that's about it. Maybe Keaton Mitchell,
Bateman,
depending on
Walker,
how you feel.
Maybe
right.
Mitchell.
Njoku's sitting here for us.
Yeah, as is Love. I know that could be another backdoor. Like we could stack up Love. I love those late Packers stacks, even with Stroud. But that gives you
that's committing to doing a bunch of wide receivers in the next couple rounds though, because they all go in the next 3 rounds, and I feel like we're pretty set at receiver.
Yeah, Lloyd, Dobbs, Wicks.
All right, let's do it.
Because I see Njoku potentially falling, and then we can get Musgrave, Schultz at tight end, a 3 tight end build. Yeah, so in what you're doing now, I love to show is like we're doing the search the team name, star some players. Like that's a great way to make sure you're getting your stacks. I know it's nuts, but it's just such I can never pass up on Love when he's fallen that far, given how stackable he is late. To me now we're getting 20-something points out of our quarterback almost every week. I'd be shocked. And so, I love this. I think it's like Njoku, but like he never had any good games with Deshaun Watson. Like I like Njoku, but we've seen one good year. Was the number 1 tight end for week 8 to week 18. So like there's definitely upside there, but I'm more intrigued to see what happens now with this like backdoor Packers build for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We're going to need a couple of guys to fall, hopefully, to make this work. But I mean, with the way we're setting up our tight end room, it would work out because we could do 3 tight ends with Musgrave, Schultz, and flirt with Hawkinson maybe falling and getting him for that bring back for the Packers game. So
yeah, we're upside for the stretch run. That's not a bad idea. I like that.
We're going to need a couple guys to fall for this Love thing to make sense. So, but I think it's possible if we can get Dobbs here, and then either Wicks or Dobbs here would be fine in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we take either guy here. Whichever one. There goes Dobbs. So I think we do have to go Wicks a little early. Because he's like the buzzy guy. He probably won't make it back to us. So yeah, if we go Wicks here, Lloyd, not maybe the next round, but the round after that, and then Musgrave after that. We could be looking at Schultz in the next round.
I've got Schultz queued up.
And Schultz is another one where like if the Stroud drafter passes, I've seen him go 20 to the next 2 rounds, falls to the Stroud drafter. So if we want to wait on him, we always could.
We've got options here.
We definitely have some options. We've got Love starting to build a Love stack. If we get Lloyd and Musgrave, I think it's great.
That would be fine, more than fine.
And I think it's very doable. Like I know we could push Schultz past 127 probably, but I'm thinking like 130, 139-ish. Is that what our next that pick after that is? 138. That's probably a good spot for Lloyd. 151 becomes Musgrave. And now we've got two great offenses. We probably top 6 offenses in the league this year, at least top 10, stacked up well. And we can try to work in some week 17 stuff, what running backs fall late. But that's what's nice about a Bijan, like an anchor build, especially as we got Mixon early, is we haven't had to sniff the running back position in a long time. Even though I like a lot of these guys, this is it's gonna be a weird one because I'm so used to like the Zach Mosses, the Najees, the Brian Robinsons. Like, that's the pocket me and you love, and we kind of went ahead and got ahead of it. And now we're going to be dipping into that second pool that I really like of the Lloyds, the Jalen Wrights, the Kendre Millers. I'm into it. I'm excited to see how this turns out.
How much Jalen Wright are you at these days? I was looking through my exposure. Like I did a long look at what I'm looking at like over these last couple of days, and I have a concerning amount of Jalen Wright for being a Q or RB3.
I swayed you on. You weren't really that into him for a little while. I think you've become a Jalen Wright disciple with me. I love it.
I have somehow.
I'm at like 30%. I got a lot.
I'm below that, but still my fair share. All right, so we're about to be up. Do you want to push Schultz or do you want to just take him here?
I think we just take him. I know he probably could get away with it, but then like that's where we want to draft Lloyd. Like one thing I like about drafting without the sticks, and you have the Q here, is I can't see if you do flag anyone that's falling that you're like, I don't know, man, this ADP, like Chase Brown, that would have been an interesting one. But like it does, like, it's nice to just kind of be able to focus only on the construction, like the stack, the position allocation. When I can't see, like, get tempted by the ADPs over here, and I can just zoom in on like what's the best way to build this team. It's kind of nice. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
I can't blame you there. It frees up a lot more of your brain power. Like it's doable to like do both things. Like, can do the sticks, like control the tabs and everything, but like it's you can focus on roster construction to a greater degree. 100%.
Yeah, I don't get as tempted. Like if I was drafting on my own here, I probably would have just clicked Chase Brown. He doesn't really correlate to anything on our team, but I just like that value. And that is, like, I know this episode is all about correlation stacking, quarterback strategy being the focus of that. So that's kind of why we're really making it a point. Sadly, we won't be getting TJ Hawkinson, it looks like.
That's okay. Take him at 132.
He's not crucial to this build.
No.
But ultimately, it is like, another whole piece of this. If you read Leone's Best Ball Manifesto, it's not just about stacking. Part 2 is all about ADP value. So there is, you do want to try to get those guys that fall that you do like, pick up 12, 15 rounds of ADP value. That's been one of the most important things as well, historically, for best ball success. So as big as stacking is, that's why he makes it part 1. That's why we really did a focus on it in this draft. Getting good ADP value is also really important. Without seeing who was there, I like Lloyd here, but is anybody falling that catches your name?
No, it's a Lloyd pick here.
Yeah, definitely a Lloyd pick. And then probably a Musgrave pick on the next
I would agree.
I would just say, though, so in front of us, let's say Musgrave's there at 151. The teams, I can tell that there's Dallas Goedert, Hawkinson. What's like the 2 tight end builds look like? Like, how many of these teams have 2 tight ends right now? Does the Komet team only have Komet?
Yeah, that's his only guy.
Yeah, so pushing Musgrave's probably, you can always go with Kraft later, who I loved before the pectoral injury. He's saying he's probably going to be back for camp, middle of camp or so. So you can miss on Musgrave and it doesn't kill you. And I have seen him fall. But I do like, 3 weapons with Love, multiple weapons with Stroud. We've stacked up 2 really good offenses, and then we can kind of play the value game and what we want to do from there. That's kind of how I like this. The only decor I'd be intrigued by would be a rookie receiver, like a Polk, a Pearsall.
And we can also do a Walker as a very last round or 17th round stab for the Houston bring back.
Yeah, Bateman as well, but he'd be at like 162 probably. And
he's 166 right now is where he's sitting, and that's kind of in the heart of what we're trying to do with some of this other stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't love Walker. I could see him just being a nothing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he catches
Yeah,
bombs.
no,
I could be wrong.
100%. You're not wrong. Like he could
I'm
easily
not
be
a
a
Walker
nothing.
fan. So like,
Yeah,
and I'm not that I'm a Bateman fan either. Like, the guy hasn't done anything in his career so far. But there's so much buzz about him that he might make sense at 162. Um, but yeah, we'll see. So it's probably going to be what, like a 2.583 is what we're
yeah,
probably looking at.
yeah, probably. Yeah,
I think
that
that makes
we're
sense
set at
for
quarterback. We're done. We don't need much at running back with the Mixon and Bijan picks. So it's seeming like and Otten goes like 25 picks ahead of ADP there, but
what the fuck? What's happening
yeah,
there?
that's okay. That's
Wait,
fine. We'll
on
grab.
Brother is drafting with us today.
I'll grab Musgrave here.
Yeah, I was gonna say if Purcell fell because then
Do
you'd
you
have the
want
week
to
17 with the
you want to
chain.
grab
Oh, no, the skinny
Chandler? We can grab Ty Chandler as well and try and push Musgrave.
I'll stack up Love here because it is one of the last weapons that matters in this offense. And like if
That's fair.
if Kraft's injury lingers and Musgrave really separates, like he's the big play guy there anyways. But if the injury allows him to separate, like Musgrave is one of those guys that could be that tight end this year. There's very few of them. We talked about in the tight end show where there's like just late round tight ends. There's not much. But Musgrave, if a Packers tight end emerges, it doesn't become a committee between him and Kraft. Man, that could be the guy. That could be the tight end that you really need.
Oh yeah,
a 6'5" monster with speed and Musgrave. Like I think it correlates too well with our team, and we're too needy at tight end right now. That, I think that makes sense to stay with the build. And then if Chandler goes, I was gonna say if Chandler wrapped around to us. Okay, now we're talking. I don't have a lot of Chandler, so I am intrigued to add more.
He's one of the guys that I grab in that pocket of running backs. The in the 140s, like the Kendre Miller area is like I grab him here and there. Like Aaron Jones has never been like a every down guy. He's like especially at this point in his career, like he's still got the explosiveness in terms of like his work in the receiving game and ability to rip off big plays. And the rhetoric coming out of Minnesota is that it's going to be like a 1A, 1B type situation. So I think like Chandler's got a path to having a meaningful workload. So here we can pull off the Rashad Bateman bring back if that's something that interests you. We could do Vidal.
Is Jalen Wright gone? Where did he? Oh, he did go.
Yeah,
huh?
he went a couple picks ago.
I was gonna say I thought he was falling. I do like Vidal. I like getting a Chargers back in every draft. It has also been Gus, as everybody knows. I like Hunter Henry as well here. Gets us a nice third tight end, but I don't think he's necessary. I prefer Vidal goes. I would have preferred him. I'm okay with the Bateman bring back to give us something in that game.
Yeah,
because Henry could fall back to us, and if not, I'm good with Jonnu, Conklin. There's plenty of third tight ends. Once those guys go, and Fant as well. Once they're gone, though, it gets. I've never been so like when I only have one tight end, and then it gets like those guys fly off the board, and you expected one of them to fall, and then you're looking at like Jelani Woods, Mike Gesicki. It's like, oh man, what happened to this position? This is ugly.
The lack of like Mike Gesicki love is like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's strange to me because like the fact that like the Joe Burrow or tight end, it's been like a revolving door in the last couple of years, but the Joe Burrow tight end has just gotten steam, like not necessarily steam, but has been a consistent pick in drafts just for being the Joe Burrow tight end. And that's just hasn't been the case in draft so far. So it's kind of weird to me. So I don't know. It's just something that I've noticed and is a little bit strange to me.
Yeah, it's probably just because it hasn't panned out. Irv Smith and that, whoever it's been like has failed. Hayden Hurst, I think, was the guy before that. And it hasn't worked out. So I think people are hesitant that it's ever going to work out. And Gesicki hasn't worked out himself. But I don't know. There has been good buzz. I was reading about it. Like he's moving around a lot. He's making a lot of red zone plays, but you get that on Gesicki and during OTAs every year. As a Pats fan, I was reading all that for a long time. The most targeted guy. All right, so we're up, huh?
I've got Ray Davis skewed here. Irving or Dobbins. I think running back is like, this is where we see a real bad fall off. So would like to
Yeah,
grab
I
one
really like Davis or Irving. I'm into both those guys.
I'll go with Ray Davis.
Yeah, I've got a lot
good
of
to
Irving.
me.
Hey, if Irving wraps around to us, and that's our fifth back. Great, I'm cool with that too. In the next round, I'm trying to look. So we didn't get much with Bijan. We haven't gotten any real Falcons, and then Commanders rather. And Sinat just goes. I was gonna say Sinat, if he made it back to us, could have given us. But we probably have McCaffrey out there still, is my guess.
Yeah, and I mean, like, yeah, we don't need to force any of that, considering we just like, we don't have Cousins, and like, it's just Bijan, like flat,
Right.
like we don't have
Yeah,
anything else.
Bijan can go off without the game going off. That's true.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
anything to force. And honestly, if the game goes off, it might not even be good for Bijan.
Yeah.
Well, he's such a good receiving back, though. So, I don't think he's game flow proof, but he's not dependent on the game going off. That's a good point.
Now, I don't know if I've asked you this yet. Like, have you? I think the like people freaking out about like the Bijan CMC usage is the dumbest thing ever. Like, what do you expect? Like, you're drafting him at 7th overall, and the Falcons drafted him with insane draft capital as a running back. Like, of course we're expecting that. It's like the peak off-season headline. Like, Bijan Robinson lining up in the slot, he's going to see more CMC like usage. Like, what? Like, of course. Like, I don't. Like, people were freaking out about that, and I was like, yeah, I really hope so.
Yeah.
I thought that was dumb.
It should be baked into this price tag. It is, coming over from the Rams. Like we've been talking about. So it's great that they're kind of confirming what we expected, sure, but we should have been. That's Corain and them. I'll talk about this a lot too. It's like people overreact to news that we should have just known. Like Nick Chubb, he gets a bad knee report, and suddenly everyone's bumping him down, or Hawkins, whatever it is. So yeah, we see that happen all the time.
It's weird.
Which I'm very pumped if he gets that. I would love to see Irving. I'm not into Dobbins actually at all. I know you start him, and I said I'd like to get that. I'd love Irving though. I think this is a great price tag on him. As much as I do like Khalil Herbert, Braylon Allen, those guys are intriguing too. I do think ideally want to queue up with some tight ends here because
we're
getting close to that cliff that I was just like, I don't love to teeter the line, and I'm guessing like Jonu's going to go to the Tua team soon. Conklin's might be gone already, but Rodgers is up there. We might be getting into like the hideous tight end territory in a second.
Yeah, we're right on that line, and there's a couple of teams who only have one tight end, so we maybe. One guy though, like Juwan Johnson, I understand the fall, but like he should not be like a locked in 18th round pick every single time. Like he's going to be back. Like the reports are that he's going to be fine for the regular season. Like I understand why he's falling, but like 18th round, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like he's going to be the number one tight end on this offense. Like you can say what you want about like Taysom Hill. Like we do this little song and dance every year. Like Taysom Hill, he's lining up everywhere on the field, everywhere in the offensive formation. Like, great. Like, he does that, and he's going to have a couple games, like, maybe one game where he scores twice and another game where he scores, like, a touchdown. Like, he's going to have games where he scores, but I don't know. Like, it's still going to be Juwan Johnson.
I will say, on DraftKings where you can take Taysom Hill, I really do like taking Taysom
Hill.
Yeah,
that's a different story.
I'm a huge fan of Taysom Hill. At his price. And if he was here for us right now and we were allowed to draft him, I don't know why Underdog took him away. It's one of the only complaints I have about Underdog ever.
He's there. He's there. He's just a quarterback, and it's like the worst pick you can make. Yeah.
You're never doing that for sure. I'm with you too, because like even if you're drafting Jennings, he didn't have many good weeks last year, but one of them was a 20-pointer in week 16. And like you're going for those 2 or 3 days where he has 2 touchdowns. Is Jonu there? Yeah, he didn't even ask.
Yeah,
he just clicked it without even asking. I love it. Jonu Smith, no brainer pick for us there. And now I like our tight end room. 2 of them are stacked. Jonu's my favorite breakout late tight end this year. I think it's brilliant. So now we have that kind of luxury week 18 or round 18 pick where probably going receiver, getting 8 receivers, but we have good receiver capital already. So it's like I think we can kind of play this one how we want to. The only position that really wouldn't make sense is quarterback, unless I can't even get into a scenario that would make sense.
Yeah, no.
But like if a running back we loved fell, I like our Mixon and Bijan start, but behind them it is pretty thin. So like I'm not opposed to a running back if that's preferable. So yeah, do you want to pull up the queue here? We can kind of see
I've
what's.
I'm locked into receiver here.
Yeah, what about Foreman though?
Like I don't know. Like with the capital that we put into this early on and taking our swings at
Mixon gets hurt though, and then we got rookies only behind him.
No,
like,
I'm not. I'm not. Why you don't need 6 running backs on a team with Bijan Robinson? Like I don't know. Like that's just how I play these drafts. Like if I'm
more so look at the garbage that's available to us. I mean, if you want to go my boy Chark or Zay Jones, if I was Zay Jones, Slayton though, it's like why a Giant? What does that do for us?
It's just like we don't have anyone to correlate really. Like in terms of week 17 at least.
I'm just sneaky into Foreman myself. But
yeah, but it just doesn't make sense for this team. Like, I don't know. I never take six running backs on a team where I'm grabbing a running back in the first round.
That's fine, especially if we have Mixon. We don't have to. I won't force the issue. I don't hate Khalif Raymond either. With our we already have JMO on this team.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fine with Raymond.
Yeah, I think that he's fine for sure.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with it.
Just because it correlates a little more with the roster, so yeah, I'm good with that. I do like Zay Jones. I'm not opposed to him, but I just don't see. We don't have any Rams. We don't have any Cardinals. Just like a one-off Zay. He's had 30-point day, so I can see it. But like all right, we're doing a stacking show. We got to have some sort of correlation with it.
Let's look through this roster here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we wrap up, Wolfpack, if any of you guys have questions, comments, 240 of you here. Great to see it. I know last week we were a little lower on numbers. It was a kind of thrown together show. I was on the road. Great to see it in a different time than we usually go. 240 is still here with us. Really, really appreciate it. One last call for that thumbs up as we wrap up our review, and last call for questions. If you have any keeper situations, anything at all. I know our YouTube numbers are a little lower today because of our different time, but great to see a lot of the Twitter, the X audience out there. Thank you guys again. So an episode about stacking. Let's dive in and look at what we did. So Bijan, the hero running back, probably my favorite strategy, even on the wide receiver obsessed underdog. Like, have you been passing on a Bijan or a Breece just because of how crazy it is, or they're there, you got to go one of those elite running backs in that 7 to 9 range?
So I've been starting to debate it because, like we both kind of mentioned, I've been getting a ridiculous number of picks in like 7 through 10, 11. And like, I was looking, like you referenced that exposure sheet from Michael Dubner. And like, if you're going to be drafting more than 50 teams this summer, like get all your teams in there. Like, it's so helpful. And I was looking at that and I was like looking at my like roster constructions, and I've got like, it was like 30%, 35 to 40% anchor RB. And I was like, what? Like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, I'm hammering receivers in these early rounds. And then I look, and it's just because like I have so many picks in like 7 through 9 that I'm just grabbing these running back, like Bijan and Breece specifically. Like I just have a ridiculous amount of them. So I may have to start adjusting there, but like for the most part, like just like not considering my personal like portfolio, like you should be grabbing Bijan and Breece there for the most part.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I have an article I'm going to wrap up today. Should be out on the site later tonight on the 6 running backs you should be considering in rounds 1 and 2. And it harkens back. I link back to a lot of the research Pat Crane did with his legendary upside article back 4 years ago now, but it's certainly aged quite well. And there's very few backs that like check all those boxes in terms of a good offensive line, touchdown equity, receiving equity, a team that, could be top 5 to 10 in scoring. Bijan checks all of them. And if there's anybody, Christian McCaffrey, I see a lot of the hot take artists, Bijan and Breece deserve to go over McCaffrey. No, not even close. McCaffrey's the stone cold nuts lock. Like, exactly what you're getting. Yeah, he's a little older. I'm always going to go McCaffrey. I'm not going to do the hot take thing. But if anyone's going to threaten him at minimum, it is Bijan and Brees. Those are the only two guys that I think have a sniff of coming near Christian McCaffrey this year at the running back position. So yeah, I can't pass him up. I know how crazy the receivers are, but like you see what we got here: Nico, Tank, Kirk, and Hollywood. And in hindsight, especially with the love, like man, if we had gone Jaden Reed there, that would have been even like juicier to have that stack. Yeah. I love how this team came out, and if there was one thing that I'm looking at, like damn, I could swap those two. I'm kind of in the philosophy though that like I want a Chiefs receiver in every draft. I've heard a lot again smart people say that. And I looked at that, like Worthy's not going to make it back to us. Rice might have made it back, but I'm more comfortable with him in the 7th right now. And I know you kind of have to go in the 6th if you're going to get him. So
he makes it to 66 pretty often. He makes it to 66 pretty often.
Yeah, I think he would have made it to us in 6. He wouldn't have in this draft, clearly, though. So like,
yeah. But like I'm saying, in most drafts, he's going to be there for you at 66 in most drafts.
Yeah, but even then, like I'm okay. Like I don't want to lock myself into I have to have a Chiefs receiver every draft, but Hollywood falling 7 picks below what he usually goes, I was okay with it at the time. But now that we got, and we kind of said it after we went Hollywood over Jaden, we're like, yeah, that could have set up another backdoor. Like love if we somehow missed on Stroud, we knew we were going to push Stroud, which that was awesome. I'm glad that worked out. We can kind of keep strolling. That's one of the only picks I thought in the first 5 that I was like, if we could go back, I would have liked to have Jaden Reed stacked with Love. I just don't love Jaden Reed there either, though. Like it could be any Packers receiver that ends up being the guy. It could be Wicks. I don't know. So anything on the first 5 picks that I didn't say though, that like
I can go do a whole Jaden Reed rant right now. I think he's an awful pick in the 5th round. Like I just but I also know like there's a range of outcomes where like he looked awesome on the field last year. He was like insanely dynamic. He was getting rushing attempts. Like his target earning stuff was great with Christian Watson off the field. When if Christian Watson on the field, that's kind of part of the argument. It was pretty pedestrian in terms of his target earning and overall efficiency. But like I understand the range of outcomes where like he is really good just because like he's super talented and a dynamic player. But in the 5th round, I think he's a horrible pick. And that's just part of the reason I have such little Jaden Reed. I think I might have him once. And like, it was when he slipped to me in the 6th. And we'll save that for another day when we do like wide receiver, like bust or something or just general bust. But right now I cannot get behind the price of Jaden Reed. But like I said, like I want to have some just because like it's not like you don't want to be full fading these 2nd-year guys. And like I'm not a fan of a lot of these 2nd-year guys that cost like Addison and Reed, but like you can't full fade guys who looked the part last year. But it's fair to be out on them at their price, and that's why I have very little Reed and Addison. But yeah,
tough, though, yeah, because like you said, he did look like eyeball test wise. I love Reed. Like that's a player I want on just like the way he plays the game, and he's awesome to watch. He's so fun. He's so dynamic, so used in such interesting ways. What that kind of makes me think of too. You said you want to get some exposure. I don't know if this is the right way to be doing it or not, but like I know that he falls to mid-round 6 in DraftKings all the time. So it's like maybe I won't have any Jaden Reed on Underdog, and I probably shouldn't completely fade someone on a site, but I know I'm going to have some because I am taking him on DraftKings where I know he falls 7 to 8 picks later than he goes on Underdog. There's a lot of guys. Xavier Worthy's another one of those where it's like he's going 80s. I get him routinely at like 80 something on DraftKings right now. So it's like, do I have a ton of them on Underdog at 59.60 too? Because I think Xavier Worthy's a smash, but I don't know. I play that game a little bit where it's like, if you know the markets and it's like, it still is kind of sketchy to be like, I will have no Jaden Reed on Underdog just for the sake of drafting him on DraftKings. But I've kind of done that quite a bit. There's definitely a handful of players that are like 10 to 20 picks in different ADPs. And it makes a difference. Like Addison goes what, like 80 on DraftKings? You hate Addison on Underdog. I know you do. And we could go on that rant. But I imagine you're trying to sprinkle in some of him on DraftKings at least when he's falling to you at like 83, and if you're not, you should be.
the hate, not necessarily hate, but just like the lack of understanding of importance of some of these younger receivers, like rookie and potential second year 2 breakouts. It's pretty prevalent on DraftKings. So and I'm much more comfortable especially on these younger guys with the DraftKings prices. But
yeah,
on Underdog, I'm quite hesitant with both of those guys that are kind of stacked up there on Glandy's team there right after us in the 8 slot. I'm not the biggest fan of either of those guys at cost on Underdog. But kind of moving on with our team, I think like you said, I'm pretty happy with how all of this went. We get Mixon there right around ADP, a couple picks past, and we push Stroud, and the people ahead of us don't want to take him unstacked, and we get him there. And then we take an upside
one
swing
point
in
there too.
J-Mo.
You talked about reading the room. One thing I think we did really well this draft is
Yeah.
read the room and where we could push things. We saw that the Diggs owner had drafted Lamar. Could he have still drafted Stroud on that entire wraparound? Maybe, but that's a lot of capital at QB. And the dude had a badge, and you're like, this guy probably knows, like, yeah, as much as this is a great value on Stroud here, I can't take it. So 79 there, we almost got dangerous and like tried to push him again. I wonder if he would have made it back, because those guys, a lot of the teams already had QBs. It would have been completely uncorrelated to him. There wasn't anyone compelling enough, though, that like, you look who went after him in terms of Jones, Kamara. We already had good running backs. Like, I like some of those running backs, but I didn't see any reason anyone that went after Stroud, for our team at least, as much I do like Najee and Ramondre and Alvin in that type of pocket. If I need a running back, we didn't need a running back, so I didn't see a reason to risk it. But I bet you if we had, we probably would have gotten him, like, even on that next wraparound. I don't know, maybe.
I would have gone Ingram if he was there. I don't want to commit to that, but that's the only guy I would have considered. Was Ingram, because we already had Kirk.
That would have been correlated too, right?
Yeah. But yeah, and then kind of moving forward, I think it was really smart, like reading the room, like you mentioned, and just understanding who's got quarterbacks and kind of understanding what kind of drafters you're dealing with. And knowing that these guys with badges are probably not going to get too out of line in terms of like optimal roster construction. You said that would have been too much capital at quarterback. That kind of just reminded me. It's kind of quick aside. I was in a draft this morning. It was this guy went Allen and Hurts at quarterback. I was like, sheesh, buddy. But that was just kind of something that made me laugh. But like, moving on,
point. There's that dude that, and God bless him, he at least puts it out there and he like lets people just lampoon him on Twitter. The Chase Claypool guy, I forget what his name is.
Mike, it's Michael something. It's
yeah,
you got
I
the
don't
same
need to
name as
pile
me.
on him, but like that's his thing this year. Is like elite QB is going to win, and maybe it does. And we all look like idiots after the fact, and this dude wins. I respect it. That's why I actually bring him up, because hey, you have your stance. You want to go for it. Like, all the power to you. I love it. Like, go for it. But I could never fathom why elite QB, when you can only start one of them, would ever be optimal. Like, you're just limiting. Yes, you're probably going to have a great QB every single week, because with Stroud and Love on our team, we're probably going to have a great QB every single week. That's not far off from what, the top 2-3 round investment you made, the opportunity cost, and how much you've just sank into a onesie. Same with bully tight end. Like, it does not make any sense to me in this type of format at all.
Yeah. There's arguments to be had, but definitely Hurts Allen is too much.
Way too much.
Yeah. So then we grab Wicks, because we kind of just have to get going with Jordan Love getting pieces there. And that's kind of just like the story of our next 4 picks, to be honest.
All about correlation, yeah.
Yeah. Next 5 picks, we grab Bateman there as a bring back for the Houston game. And I think they're all fine picks. Like we mentioned kind of in our previous show about week 17, and I mentioned in my article on week 17, it's optimal, but you can't force the picks by reaching on ADP. And we're into round 10 through 14 here, and it's fine to reach a couple picks ahead of ADP, like we did on some of these picks, like 2 or 3. I think it was like the most out of line we got was like a couple of picks ahead of ADP, and that's fine, especially given the relative cost in these rounds. So it's completely, I think all these picks are fine. They make sense with the roster, and I'm a fan of most of these players. Like Rashad Bateman, skeptical at best, but you gotta, it makes sense with the roster, and like there's legitimate buzz as to why he may be okay this year. And like, it's not an egregious pick by any means, especially considering we got him near ADP. And then some upside swings at running back with some rookies here to get going in the later rounds. And then our boy Jonnu, who is one of my highest owned tight ends. I'm a full blown on the Jonnu train because of you. Like, it makes sense. Like, the offense has never used, like, the Mike McDaniel offense has never used a tight end at a high capacity. But why am I blanking on his name from last year? The Rams.
Durham Smythe.
Yeah, Durham Smythe. I was thinking.
Why are you blanking on it? Because it's Durham Smythe is his name.
The weird part is River Craycraft came to mind. Like, they're like fifth wide receiver from last year. I kept thinking of that name, but that's like River Craycraft. I mean, you're never gonna hear that name again. I hope not. He's gonna be gone from people's memory banks here soon. And then Khalif Raymond, like, we've talked about him being a fine 18th rounder. Like, he showed a skill last year. Like he's got the ability to have some weeks. This is going to be a potent offense. And JMO, while the reports indicate that he's a locked in wide receiver too, there's no guarantees there. Like, Raymond's going to be the wide receiver 3 at worst, most likely. Like, I don't see him getting passed by anyone else on that depth chart. So wide receiver 3 at worst. And like, that kind of just builds up our bet on the Detroit offense. So I think a lot of this, it all makes sense in terms of the roster construction. I know you were pushing for a 6th running back. Maybe we can have a discussion on that some other day. I can never do it when I'm drafting a guy in round 1. I stop at 5 every single time. Yeah.
I'm with you too. Like, I was pushing, but not really too hard. Like, I'm thinking through here is like, again, never rooting for injuries, anything of that nature. But like, we have a weird kind of bet that I wasn't even thinking of in the idea of, like, let's say Amon-Ra has a hammy in week 17. Like, we now have JMO and Khalif Raymond against a mediocre 49ers secondary. You know, like, those are the type of things that, like, you don't think of, because you never want to think of Amon-Ra getting hurt. I have a ton of Amon-Ra, like, well beyond just having him in best ball. You don't want a stud to ever go down. I never am rooting for that. But a little tweak happens there. And like, that's the type of situation that Khalif Raymond over a running back that we went, you know, a random, you know, Dylan Laube, who I always love. But like, Raymond actually gives us like a narrative. It's not a fun narrative that anybody wants to, like, oh, Amon-Ra goes down. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, like, oh, yay, Khalif Raymond in week 17 because I want an injury. But those type of things happen, even if it wasn't in week 17. Like, if he misses 2 games over the course of the year, this offense still is explosive, and like, Raymond will probably play that St. Brown role. He's more of that slot guy after the catch guy. So it is interesting. You know, one kind of takeaway that I'm thinking is just a general thing too. It's hard to be like, everybody out there should be doing a million drafts like we are. But the fact that we've been doing these drafts for as long as we have, just streaming every Monday, and then of course in between we do plenty of drafts on our own. At least on Underdog, like, I just feel like I know the board. Like, it was so easy for me to be like, we can go Jordan Love because we're going to get Wicks at 111. We're going to get Marshawn Lloyd at 139. Luke Musgrave will be there at 151. Like, maybe that's just a commentary on how much of a nutbag and like pathetic my life might be. But ultimately, like, if you understand these pockets when you're building these stacks, it can really help you out. Like, you know, otherwise, like, going Jordan Love there probably doesn't make sense. But when you've done so many drafts that you're like, yeah, I know exactly where these Packers weapons often go, and it's lined up exactly where we're kind of drafting from right now, we probably could build out a nice Packers stack in an offense that, you know, yeah, Jaden Reed's the number 1 that goes in drafts, and Christian Watson goes ahead of the guys we took. But it is far from a guarantee that either of those guys end the year as the number 1. Like, Scott Barry has that great tweet about like wide receiver committees essentially, and they're one of the top teams in that bucket in terms of like how they spread out routes and shares and everything. And so maybe Wicks, who had the best yards per route run, ends up being that guy. But just the general, beyond just the Packers, like, knowing where people go, knowing that Schultz is going to be there right at 127, and if we wanted to push him, we might be able to get him at 139, but that means Lloyd would probably be off the board for us, and it doesn't correlate well with our team. Like, you just can kind of see the board the more drafts you do, and yeah, it's kind of psycho to do this many before training camp even starts, but once you start seeing the wild swings in ADPs when quote-unquote more casuals come to it, there's just such an advantage, and I think it's going to serve us really well that, like, even if it's just one a week right now and you kind of get a feel for the market and then you can see how it changes. I encourage everybody out there to keep getting the drafts. If you're watching this, you probably are drafting a lot anyways. And if you're not, somehow on Underdog, code RSJ or the link in the description could get you up to 250 in bonus cash. But I just, it's kind of sick how it's become second nature for me, where like I know that Rashad Bateman's a bring back that we can have at 162, and we're not going to get another shot at him because the Ravens team will almost always be right ahead of that. Like, you just have these, like, the pockets. I'm not quite there on DraftKings yet because I haven't done nearly as many on there. But you probably have that feel on DraftKings because I know that's where you do a lot of your drafts. Where you're like, I know exactly how this draft could unfold. Well, DraftKings is way more crazy though.
It's unpredictable. I haven't drafted on DraftKings in like a little over a week and a half now because they just don't open very many contests. And I'm just saving my bullets in some of these like 20 entry contests where I want to draft a little bit in August. So I've had to hold off just because there's just a lack of variety in contests. So that's just the only problem with DraftKings. But I agree. It is probably more of a testament to the fact that we draft way too much. But it is what it is. Like it's helpful. Like understanding where you can do certain things in the draft, it gives you a massive advantage over the people who like don't have that kind of in-depth knowledge of where ADPs sit and everything like that. So I while it may sound brutal in terms of like just our general outlooks of
social
who we are, it helps in these drafts. That's all you can really say. And taking advantage of it is one of the better ways that you can build out drafts with correlated pieces. And I've always said, like, you want your team at the end of it to tell a story. And that's like a kind of a common sentiment throughout like the best ball community, like having something that makes sense. And I think we achieved that with this draft. There's a lot of correlated pieces. We didn't get as many bringbacks as I would like, but it is what it is. Like you can't get to them every time. So I think it ended up shaking out all right.
Yeah, we talked again, stacking our optimal quarterback strategy in terms of advancing. Having two quarterbacks stacked with multiple weapons has been the best, whereas three QBs has been a slightly better advantages because of how more uncommon it is in the playoffs, and you give yourself more outs for it to hit. But when we invested in Stroud and Love, there's no way it would have just been, suboptimal use of our resources to go for that 3 QB just for the sake of being a little different. And I think we built it out well. Like you mentioned, more Sweet 17 bringbacks. Yeah, probably would have been nice to see in here, but stacking is far more important because that counts for all of the weeks that you have, not just that final week. That does really mean everything, but our team is in a good shape if these two offenses do well. And I think most people would agree the Packers and the Texans are two very exciting offenses. And I think this is a good one. If anything else, just to read the board and know when you can push things, I think we did that better than I've probably done all offseason so far, in terms of recognizing that. So I thought this one turned out really interesting. I say that after most of their drafts, but this one in terms of like sheer, last week was not a masterclass in like roster construction. Like I liked a lot of the players we got, and I thought they had some interesting takes, but this was a really interesting, like, how to stack. And this worked out well. Like for our topper to be stacking and then this to be our team, I think it worked out really well. Like I'm very pleased with how these came out and how correlated. We talked about how elite tight end's the best option, and then we drafted a punt tight end team. Like this is like the first times we've actually had what we talked about line up with what we did. So I thought that was great. But yeah, so I think that wraps it up. Wolfpack, again, 250. If you're on your way out, please do consider hitting that thumbs up button, the like button, the share button on Twitter, any of that good stuff. It really does help us grow so much. And of course, check out rotostreetjournal.com where you can find my content, my rankings. I have the 6 running backs to draft in rounds 1 and 2, and a dive into like what type of running backs you want to be looking for when you're considering that, Bijan clearly being one of them, and those hero running back type of builds. That should be out later today. So definitely check that out if you enjoy that type of content. Mo, anything on the site that you've recently come out with that you'd like to pump?
There was like, if you're like I've said before, if you're listening to this in July, you're probably pretty familiar with Best Ball. but I did like just a general like overview, like what is best ball, like how is it different from redraft, like explaining the tournament structures and how the playoff progression works, and then explaining just like some different, like how draft strategy in general differs between the two formats. So if you're kind of like looking to get into best ball, or like you're just getting into it and you've done a couple of drafts, or just like if you've never even heard of it, head over there. I've got an explainer of just like how you can transition from being a redraft guy into what I like to call just like developing your best ball brain. And so that's just kind of like there's not a lot of pieces out there that kind of like give you like this is like, if you've never played best ball, this is what you have to understand, where you should start. So it's just like a really good starting point. And there's some more advanced topics that I like try to just like not necessarily dumb down, but just like explain in like more understandable terms without getting too crazy, because like some best ball people in the best ball space, like it's a really data-driven game and it can get a little overwhelming pretty quickly. So kind of just generally going over some of the concepts. So go check that out over at rotostreetjournal.com.
Yeah, it's a great accessible piece. Like you said, you made it really easy to understand, and yeah, it's the basics, but yet it also, you dove into a lot of interesting strategy that's always good to brush up upon for any level of best ball player. And I actually like to read it because of like the redraft in me is so far gone right now that like it's kind of good to write like, oh shit, Isaiah Pacheco's going in round 2. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, we gotta get ready for this onslaught that's about to happen as we transition to some redraft content coming up in the next month and a half or so. That we'll be focusing on throughout the summer. But thank you again so much for tuning in, Wolfpack. We really appreciate you guys. I know it was a different time than usual, so awesome to see you guys here. One last plea for that thumbs up button. That greatly helps us out on your way out. We'll be back next Monday, probably the usual time at 4 p.m., but just, of course, check our Instagram, check our Twitter, where we'll announce if there ever has to be a scheduling difference. I do know I'm going to be away on a family trip coming up. And then I have my anniversary coming up. So there's going to be a couple ones towards the end of July that we might have a few different times at. I don't think drafting at 4 p.m. on my anniversary in the middle of Newport is going to go over well with the wife. So that might be a morning draft or something of that nature. We will see for sure. But thank you again so much for tuning in, Wolfpack. Make sure to follow Mo_FFB or at Roto Street Wolf if you listen to the podcast as well. Thank you for your support there at the Fantasy Fullback Dive. Any reviews help us out so greatly on that. In a world full of fantasy sheep guys, be the wolf. Until next time, later.